Good morning and welcome to chapter 11 of this series of short classes, or well, half-hour videos on popular culture in Britain since 1945. And I've been looking in this series, in the most recent series, on at visual art, at a series of British artists most recently. And to, first of all, to introduce their work briefly, but also to reflect a little bit on where they fit in with this question of who does art belong to? Is it high culture? Is it popular culture? And so on. And I finished last week looking at one of the young British artists, as we called them in the 80s and 90s, especially the 90s, Tracy Emin. And here's another one, Damien Hirst, who's one of probably the most prominent, internationally renowned. And he indeed managed to do very well for himself and made a lot of money with his art. Of course, most artists manage to survive on their art very often by teaching art as well, or having some other job. But it is possible to make a huge amount of money from art, and Damien Hirst apparently is worth at least owns more than £200 million. And one of his favorite themes is death, always a popular theme in art in general. And what do we have here to look at? Yes, well, let's just introduce some more general. There he is, and with a couple of his works in his studio. Some of the works are not difficult to interpret. You can see this one fairly straightforward, really, intertextual. Obviously, you see on the left Mickey Mouse, and on the right Ronald McDonald, then two very extremely well-known symbols of American commercial success, coming to influence the entire world and be present in almost every country. And in the middle, perhaps you recognize this photograph, which is one of the most famous photographs of journalism of the 20th century. It's a young girl who has just been burnt by napalm bombs during the war in Vietnam. That the United States dropped bombs, including napalm bombs, which are chemicals which burns your skin, and that's why she's taken her clothes off. She's running away and screaming. So here we have a work which is not as I say, not difficult to interpret. You can see it seems to be a warning or a denunciation of what American corporate culture has brought to the world. On the one hand, Mickey Mouse and Ronald McDonald, who are very much enjoyed by larger numbers of people, but also very much criticized, in particular by intellectuals, as being some sort of power for uniformizing culture across the world and destroying local culture. And then the bombs, which were often interpreted as a way of the United States maintaining its position as a world power by fighting in Vietnam. Of course, they lost, which is very unusual for a world power, but it's very interesting. So something interesting, but not difficult there. Here we have another of his pieces, which is actually outside in the streets then. Now, Damien Hirst was born in Bristol and grew up in Leeds. His father was a motor mechanic, and his mother worked for the Citizens Advice Bureau. So they were from working class jobs. And he began working on London building sites as a builder, and then studied fine arts and did extremely well. And indeed came to know Charles Saatchi, extremely rich person, and who offered to fund whatever artwork he wished to make. And this is what led in 1992 to the first Young British Artists exhibition at the Saatchi Gallery in North London. This is the most expensive work that he ever made. As I said, that death was one of his main themes. And this piece is called For the Love of God. And it is a human skull recreated in platinum and adorned with 8,601 diamonds. So the actual materials cost around £15 million. and the sale price was 50 million pounds, but eventually it was not. It was bought by a consortium, including the artist himself. So there's something rather special going on. Again, the interpretation here is not tremendously difficult, I wouldn't think. That it's the most expensive object you can imagine. And of course, it's also telling you you can't take it with you. It doesn't matter how rich you are. When you become a skull like this, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, as the poem says. This is an earlier piece, a year or two earlier. No, quite a few years earlier. This is in the early 90s, and this is the first piece that became famous by Damien Hirst. Probably a bit more difficult. It's a dead shark preserved in formaldehyde. And the title then, the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. Yes, obviously something a little bit more difficult to look at, and of course very much mocked by the conservative press, you can imagine. And just to finish with Damien Hirst, his most recent work, then from 2007, perhaps not his most recent work, but one of his most recent works is Treasures from the Wreck of the Unbelievable in 2017. And what he did is he filled a museum with treasures which had been rescued from a wreck at the bottom of the ocean. Except that perhaps you'll guessed, in fact, it's completely invented. He wasn't trying to fool people. He was inventing. It was unbelievable because, in fact, he actually just created all these and then put them in a context as if they had come from a wreck. So a certain reflection on history and bringing it back and contemporary art. There are a large number of pieces. Here's another piece that then from a very violent piece from the wreck of the unbelievable, and it's unbelievable because of course it's just false and untrue. Another of his works, which I haven't put here, is an actual is a dead cow with maggots and flies feeding on it inside a glass case. So again, not necessarily the sort of thing that you want in your living room next to the armchair, but these different reflections on death. The previous one, the physical impossibility of death in the mind of somebody living, was referred to in a Daily Mail article, and the Daily Mail, the conservative press, and they said, "For 1,000 years, art has been one of our great civilizing forces. Today, pickled sheep and soiled beds threaten to make barbarians of us all." So you obviously a tremendously negative reaction from some people. Let's move on to another gentleman, Andy Goldsworthy, then born in 1956, son of a professor of applied mathematics. Again, grew up in Leeds and worked as a labourer on farms initially before studying at Bradford College of Art. And now he has something quite different to show us, and you can see it here. And this is a combination really of land art, that is to say, art which is placed in the countryside or in the landscape, and that's part of the deal, and also historical folk memory. So I have to explain what's going on with this. This is an arch. There's more of it. And what he actually did is that he makes this. I think this is great. Yeah, he makes this without cement, so it's rock balancing, and he followed a traditional road which people used to take with their animals many hundreds of years ago. And every evening or every morning or every afternoon, once a day, he built his arch in a particular place, having asked permission of whoever it belonged to. And so, and then took photographs of it, of course, and made a book out of it. And so it's this idea of something coming up from the past. This path used to be tremendously important for hundreds of years for people taking their animals north, and now it is being commemorated in a way by the artist who's carrying these stones around, probably in a van, and building the arch once a day in homage. So here you get different aspects. First of all, the land art aspect, also the happening aspect, that the art is somehow what is done rather than the actual object. And again, one might think that one of the things that comes from this is that it makes people think, and certainly he had to explain to people what he was doing, and I'm sure that many of them were somewhat nonplussed at the idea. He produced other pieces also involved in stones and so on. So there you can see again, it's a block of stone with a crack, and then the crack continues in the earth. Yeah, so it's conceptual in different ways. And here's what he says. I find some of my new works disturbing, just as I find nature as a whole disturbing. The landscape is often perceived as pastoral, pretty, beautiful, but anybody who works the land knows it's not like that. Nature can be harsh, difficult, and brutal, as well as beautiful. Okay, so that's what he has been doing. There's another one of his there. Something completely different. This Mark Wallinger was born in 1959. And he was one of the people indeed who did a sculpture for the fourth plinth, the project which I spoke to you about a couple of weeks ago. And he is also rather specific in that he has done some very directly political pieces. And we have seen occasionally political art, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's very common in contemporary British art, which might say something about the market indeed. And here is one of the pieces which he did quite recently. This is 2019, and it is The World Turned Upside Down. And in fact, it is quite literally a globe presented upside down. So you see there you can see the north of Africa in the middle of the picture, and as you go further up, you're going towards the south of Africa. So very relatively simple idea of looking at the world in a different manner. It is in the streets. So again, from the point of view of high culture, popular culture, it is popular in the sense that it's in the street for everybody, and in the sense that you don't need a lot of training to know what he's doing. There it is in the streets. Now, interestingly enough, the position is always important for any work of contemporary art. And here you have on the left, the London School of Economics, an extremely respected school of economics, probably the best known one in the world. And on the right, a church. So it's not an accident that we're turning the world upside down right here. Yet it's interesting to see how it was paid for. It's very expensive. That's perhaps not surprising to know it's very expensive. And it was paid for by old pupils of the London School of Economics. Some of them who had made money, they paid for this to be outside. Yes, so there's a way in which contemporary art can sometimes be transgressive and also very much appreciated by the elite. I told you a moment ago that Damien Hirst was funded by Saatchi, very extremely rich man. Okay, so that's the world turned upside down. This one requires a little bit of explanation, and you have to go back into the recent history of Britain. But I don't know if I have very precisely the dates. Yes, 2007 is the recreation. So this in fact is not a work of art. It was a peace camp opposite the Houses of Parliament, and organized by a peace campaigner, Brian Hoare, during the Iraq War to to a Christian, to protest against the Iraq War. And so he set up all this, and he lived there, and he set up all of this, and with pictures of the horrible things which British bombs had done in Iraq, and campaigning to stop the war in Iraq, just opposite the Houses of Parliament. And by some accident of law, after he'd been there for a few months, by some accident of law, the police were no longer allowed to move him away. I can't remember if it was, if you stay somewhere for a certain amount of time, it is your home. And so for years, the British government had to put up with this very loud protest camp just opposite the Houses of Parliament, with millions of tourists coming to see what it was about. So obviously they were not too happy with that. Now, eventually, what they did was the government passed a specific law to make protest illegal within 1 kilometer. I think it was within 1 kilometer of the Houses of Parliament. So they passed a new law. Now, in fact, it didn't work because there was for Brian Hoare's peace camp for reasons of illegal technicality. But that's what they decided to do. And this is where Mark Wallinger came in, and he, with a group of people, he made an exact replica of Brian Hoare's peace camp. This is his replica, and it's exactly the same. He found the same that you see a detail here. He found the same teddy bears, the same Christian statues, the same kind of plants and everything. And so he made an exact replica. It took 15 people 6 months, and it cost £90,000. And he placed it in Tate's, is it Tate Britain? Yes, he placed it in Tate Britain. And he managed to place it so that exactly half of this protest installation is less than 1 kilometer from the Houses of Parliament. And so he could put this and say, look, this half of this work of art is illegal, and this half is not illegal. So of course, the objective is to mock the government, and also to protest against the Iraq War. And this actually won the Turner Prize, which I shall talk about later, which is the most important prize for contemporary art in Britain. So there is Mark Wallinger. This is the piece he did for the fourth plinth. Moving on, we're just wandering through them pretty quickly. I don't have quite as much information about Bill Woodrow, but the piece I've seen of his most often, this is in the British Library, in the foyer of the British Library, so the National Library, and you can see that it appears to be a book which is chained down with a ball and chain as if it was in prison. Again, not very complex symbolism. He tends to work with metal like that. He also worked with a series of pieces where he's reflecting on the difference between the everyday and the sublime. So there you have something which looks like a washing machine, and he's cut out just enough of the metal in it to make a model of a violin. So there's a sort of reflection here on the everyday and the sublime, as I say. There you can go for high culture and popular culture if you like. Here is a piece of his from 1995, Bunker Mule. It's somewhere in Denmark, I think. And they are indeed bunkers that you can hide in, but they're also models of mules. Mule, I think, is a cross between a horse and a donkey. And finally, one recent one, 2010, there's this tunnel where inside going off into this tunnel are all these chains, and at the end of each chain, a book. Again, something fairly open, symbolic, not tremendously easy to have a very precise interpretation, but supposed to be interesting because tunnels doing things that tunnels don't usually do, books in positions where books are not usually found, and so on and so forth. That's Bill Woodrow. Probably more well-known, Anthony Carro, who was born in 1924, so he's actually pretty old, and I wonder if he's still around. Actually, he may have changed since last year. And he's well known for outdoor sculptures, which you can like or not really like very much. I must admit, I have difficulty with them. They're very often like this sort of rust color, but very much appreciated. He got plenty of commissions, sometimes a different color. So here is an Anthony Carro by the sea. Another, again, a more typical one there. That's what we're used to seeing when we think of Anthony Carro. And an inside one. This is called Month of May. So again, it's all about shapes and metal and so on. So what else can I tell you about Anthony Carro? He found international success in the late 1950s. And that's about all, really. They sometimes say that one of the important things about Carro is that he never used a plinth. Like many sculptors do use a plinth or even play with the idea of the plinth. And he was honoured by the Queen with the Order of Merit in May 2000. Then move on to Anthony Gormley, then born in 1950. You can see that although we've had a couple of women, it's very much male-dominated in general. And Anthony Gormley's most well-known work is this, The Angel of the North, which stands somewhere up north in the northeast near Newcastle, Sunderland, somewhere like that. And it's enormous, incidentally, and it's supposed to symbolize the North. So it's got a question of expression of regional identity. Now, the regional identity of the North is extremely important. You'd have to compare it to something like Marseille, for example. People really care that they're from the North. And indeed, I discovered after I'd been in France for 20 years that when people say, where are you from? I always say automatically, I'm from the north of England. Whereas I would never say, oh, I'm from England. So it must be important. So the Angel of the North, I think you can see the link with other great statues, the great statue of Jesus above Rio. I think it's above Rio, symbolizing then the city, and here symbolizing then the North, the angel, and yet it's not an angel in a traditional sense, because although the figure has wings, they seem to be aeroplane wings rather than angels' wings, and rather than the beautiful faces which angels usually have, we just have this generic, powerful, and slightly intimidating human face. And he wrote an explanation to some extent beside the angel. The hilltop site is important and has the feeling of being a megalithic mound, that is to say, some of the first funerals from thousands of years ago. When you think of the mining that was done underneath this site, because it is built on a place where there were coal mines, and coal mining was very, very important for the region, there is a poetic resonance. Men worked beneath the surface in the dark. It is important to me that the angel is rooted in the ground, the complete antithesis of what an angel is, floating about in the ether. It has an air of mystery. You make things because they cannot be said. Now, it's very interesting what he says there at the end. You make things because they cannot be said, which is makes life very difficult for people like me who are trying to explain in words what the art is supposed to be doing. Here's another piece of his, again in the street. So making, now obviously the Angel of the North, well, it is tremendously popular, partly because it responded to an identity which already existed, but didn't have its symbol. Yeah? So there you are. Here's another one in the streets. So this whole idea of sculpture in the streets, this fits with this tension between high art. I did sculpture at the Royal the Royal College of this or that, and popular art in that it's placed somewhere where it's available for everybody. One of his pieces, one of my favorite pieces of his is these, and again this is iron figures of human beings, but these are placed on the beach, and so sometimes they're underwater and sometimes they're not underwater. So I thought that was that had a certain I liked it anyway. And here you can see the artist himself with some recent work. Again, figures in metal of human beings, but here they seem to be breaking down. Are they pixelized? Is this because we are becoming more and more present as digital presences and so on? Again, the idea is to make people think, to give people ideas, or to show aspects of reality in a way we're not used to seeing it, although this, of course, is more in a gallery than outside. Now, I'm going to stop there, although it's only 25 minutes, because I have a big section afterwards on the Turner Prize, and I want to start chapter 12 with that. This was chapter 11. Thank you for listening.